Thank you. Next, we will have coming to speak to us on secondary education. Um, she is the, well, retired deputy of, Department of Education, New York City, Terry Carmen.
Yes, Carmen.
The floor is yours.
Good morning. And thank you, Dr. Ada. And to all of you, I'm just floored at such a prestigious group of people who are here today speaking. And to you, Dr. Essie, Jess, I feel your pain. And it's wonderful. And all I can say to that is that we are very fortunate and blessed to have you in the position that you're in. Thank you. So good morning to or afternoon to each of you, wherever you may be. I am a retired special ed high school teacher who has also worked during the last 4 years of my 25-year plus career as an educator, as a transition coordinator with the New York City Department of Education. The transition coordinator is responsible for the preparation of students with disability for an enviable life plan beyond high school. This includes developing for each student a strength-based plan which will lead to the student's highest possible level of independence and meaningful employment. This preparation begins when a student enters the 9th grade and continues throughout his or her high school years. Families are included in the development of the child's plan to enter into a post-secondary placement and enrollment. It is disheartening to see how our students and families are being impacted by the devastation of this last year's turmoil. As a result, I feel we need to reimagine the workforce. As you know, there are many inequities in both progressive and third world countries that have globally wreaked havoc on our entire education system. But today, the COVID pandemic is the horrible monster that makes these inequities even more viable and real. And so I will speak on a few areas that I feel COVID has had that impact the greatest on our children. COVID-19, the global learning crisis and impending havoc to community education. Learning loss has been brought on by the COVID-19 pandemic and the growth of disparities result from it. It's a fact, students need help. The pandemic has set back learning for all students, but especially students of color. When the COVID-19 pandemic prompted our historic shutdown of United States schools or schools everywhere, leaders speculated that disruption would last from a few weeks to maybe a few months. And now we have a new surge of infection that's likely to keep students attending school in a modified fashion well into 2022. Educators, parents, and students know firsthand the high cost of prolonged remote learning. It has incited rising rates of depression, anxiety, and loss of student learning. This pandemic has taken an especially heavy toll on Black, Hispanic, and indigenous communities, along with robbing them of their lives and livelihoods. School shutdowns have denied students from these communities the opportunities to get education that they need to build a brighter future. A study was done in the spring by a company called McKinsey & Company, examining how school shutdowns compound racial disparities in learning and achievement, analyzing the toll on learning, dropout rates, and the overall economy. Spring assessments show students of color are about 3 to 5 months behind in learning. White students were 1 to 3 months behind. Black and Hispanic students continue to be more likely to remain remote and are less likely to have access to the prerequisites of learning, things such as devices, internet access, and live contact with teachers. Left unaddressed, these opportunities gaps will translate into wider achievement gaps. The potential learning loss by June 2021 would be has been a substantial, especially in mathematics. Students with disabilities are even more vulnerable of students due to the lack of routine, consistency, close monitoring, and individual coaching. Key lessons as the education system responds to the coronavirus crisis. Remote learning requires several key elements to be highly effective. Some of them are A, research on homeschooling, which shows it works well when students who have consistent access to intentional, personalized, and sufficient resources. B, reduced learning time has impeded students' learning and affected the development of the whole child. C, chronic absenteeism during remote learning reinforces the urgency of providing appropriate support to children who are least prepared, and especially to those at risk of becoming disengaged and eventually drop out. D, summer learning to recover or gain a class is important for personalized instruction. And E, there is a need for contingency planning, and the lack of it has a negative impact and has caused more pandemics on learning. A second issue would be pandemic consequences for education. Learning and development have been interrupted for millions of students. The only effective response is to use diagnostic tests and other tools to meet each child where they are and devise a plan for making up those interruptions. The pandemic has exacerbated well-documented opportunity gaps that are for low-income students that are disadvantaged relative to the better off peers. These are gaps in access to conditions and resources that enhance learning and development, as in food, housing, healthcare, insurance, and financial relief measures. Uneven access to devices and internet access is critical to learning online. The digital divide has made it virtually impossible for some students to learn during the pandemic. The pandemic has exacerbated the limitation of standardized tests, which reward a narrow set of skills of the more affluent student who have access to specialized instruction. So how do we address the adverse impacts of COVID on education to rebuild stronger? I've noted relief that gives schools items such as laptops and communities, Wi-Fi, urgent resources so that they can provide effective remote instruction and support at scale during the pandemic. A second would be recovery, provide extra investments to help students and schools make up lost ground as they return to in-school operations. Some ways to help this might be after school classes or night classes, some form or fashion to get students in so that they can recover where they've lost. And rebuilding, redesign the system to focus on nurturing the whole child, balancing cognitive and social emotional skills, development, and ensuring that all children have access to the conditions and resources that enhance the learning and development. In other words, we need to meet the child where they are so that no child is left behind. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Ms. Terry. You know, interesting. My aunt, her name is Terry, and it spells the same. My wife's name is Terry, but that spells with an I. I like educators. This is so good to know that we have so many educators here, you know. Be it current or retired, it is so, so good. Because because we can all make valuable contributions to the way the education system is going based on past experiences, current experiences, and at the same time, how we can help in the future moving forward. Um, and in your line of work coming from your your area, that is a very challenging area for a lot. So thank you very much for your service in that area. I know you have done an excellent job serving in that area for 25 years. So I salute you for that. 25 years. I know it's not easy, but you've done an excellent job, I can tell. So thank you very much for your service. Next, we're going to look at building back better on community classroom. For this section, the speakers here, each speaker will have 7 minutes. So coming to speak to us here in this section he'll be speaking to us on the pillars of learning and bridging the gap on community education. He is the Outreach Director and Unit Representative for Barr, Juni and the Irene Menekaya Foundation. But before he comes, I would like to acknowledge some of the members of the Barr, Juni Irene Menekaya Foundation. So we have Dr. Juni Menekaya, who is, we can see you, sir. Thank you. We have Dr. Ushi Menekaya. We have Bar Chinilo Emido. Am I saying that correctly, Dr. Ada? Ah, yes, man. Thank you very much. And then we have Dr. Namidi Menekaya. I know I've been practicing real hard. Dr. Ada's been really working with me and my African dialect. But thank you very much to all of you wonderful members of the Barjuni Foundation. Thank you. So coming to speak to the Engineer Chuma Menekaya. He will be speaking to us now on the pillars of learning and bridging the gap of community education. So Mr. Chuma, over to you, sir.
Good day, everyone. I know we're all located at different parts. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I am way here. My name is Chuma Menekaya. I'm the director, outreach director for the UN Rep, and I'm also the president of Majestic Consultancy Inc. in New York. I think it's been a very great speech from all the presenters that spoke earlier, and before really mentioned the very important, keynotes. Okay, and I think on the other hand, I would like to kind of establish some kind of a foundational and fundamental for digital education, because we've come at a point whereby, yes, in as much as the pandemic was seen as something that was strange and very bad for the entire world, but I think even in that midst, I think we have also identified an opportunity to be able to reach out to much more people, all around the world, even to places that we've not been able to get to previously. So the pandemic occurred, the whole world got shut down for about a year, no doubt. There's need for a new transformative way of educational learning, which we have been able to identify from this pandemic. Second thing, foundational thing we want us to also understand is the underlying concept. Education is a development agenda to achieve the SDG 17 goals that has 167 targets. Like Dr. had mentioned earlier, there's remaining 9 years, and here out of this 17 have number 4, which is the quality education. It's if we go on, and also ensuring good tactical strategy to enable higher quality education that will include our community. So I think that's one foundational thing that we really want to establish with this ideology of digital education. Importance of education also, we have to also understand that the education helps to gain and improve knowledge. Saying knowledge is power, and that is true. improve social and economic status through life, help in our career growth and personal growth. It is the birthright of every living person on planet Earth, helps in living a better and peaceful life. So no doubt that these are some of the benefits of education in the life of humanity. Here we can see precisely the 17 goals of United Nations for 2030 and looking at number 4, the quality goal. And this whole 17 goal is all about sustainability, sustainable development, sustainability, long-term goals that will become very positively impactful in our various societies, communities, and so on and so forth. So now brings me down, after the establishment of these foundational and fundamentals, that brings me down to the aspect of the digital education. It's an innovative use of digital tools and technology during teaching and learning. Often refers to technology enhanced learning, TEL, or e-learning. Okay. Use of digital technology can give educators opportunity to design engaging learning opportunities in the course or subjects they teach. And that's absolutely true because, you are teaching, it can also kind of relate some kind of, effects or images or videos that can actually relate for one to understand the subject matter being discussed. And digital education or digital learning can be in two forms. So it's either blended learning, which is combination of face-to-face interaction with online activities. Example, it's a flipped classroom where online activities are completed during the face-to-face time spent in class. The second aspect form is online learning, gives flexible study schedule, collaborative experience, ability to have contact with students from around the world, study from anywhere in the world, and connecting with everyone, in the world. So coming down now is after understanding the reason for this, some of these objectives, our foundation by Juni's vision, mission, aims, and objective for digital education. So our vision is to establish a digital education system, rural, of course, for continued education in communities of developing countries to meet quality and inclusive education for lifelong learning, and the SDG 17 goal, precisely the number 4 for 2030 Global Sustainable Development. Mission is to establish a Center for African Transformative Education in partnership with local education institutions, agencies, private and global partners by addressing and applying the 4 A's. So those 4 A's are about the affordability, being available, accessible, acceptable for education. And our aim is to ensure every community enjoys continued quality and inclusive education for lifelong learning, access to high quality, affordable, remotely delivered education programs. So these are the visions, the missions, and lastly, the objective through the RUA project, develop exciting digital education curriculum for remote learning based on the global agenda on quality and inclusive education. Develop comprehensive digital education system with appropriate teaching and learning resources in rural communities, implement a program of widespread access to personalized 4 A's of digital education learning, which is the 4 A's, the availability, accessibility, acceptability, and so on. Invest on affordable personalized electronic device to enable individual participation in remote learning education programs in rural communities. Access to high quality, affordable, remotely delivered education program. So, and the other models also has to do with the model created to position quality and inclusive education for lifelong learning without leaving anyone behind, benefit from the opportunity provides through life. So I think, digital education is kind of quite very, very interesting, in as much as, we faced through those pandemic period, and then this was an opportunity to actually reach out to every single person, even in the worst, most remote places, to be able to provide this learning, which we all know that it's all has a positive outcomes, good life, peace in the society, and so many more. So The pillars of learning, the four pillars of learning, based on what we are, one of the aims and missions for this real project is learning to know. So that learning to know, what does it mean? It's a combined broad general knowledge with opportunities to work in depth on personalized level, benefit from the opportunities education provides through life, learning to be, to develop one's personality and act with greater autonomy, judgment, and personal responsibility, provide individual with self-analytical and social skills to develop their fullest potential. So that absolutely gives you a very great access to a lot of different learning forms. Learning to do, to acquire occupational skills to be competent, knowledgeable, and ability to solve problems with teams of various backgrounds and skills. Provide individual with the skill to effectively participate in the global economy and society. And the fourth pillar of learning is learning to live together. So developing an understanding of other people and appreciation of interdependence, carrying out joint projects, and learning to manage and resolve conflict develops the value of mutual understanding, human rights, democratic principles, intercultural understanding, respect and peace in our society and human relations. So absolutely, we can see some of the great benefit of education, the digital education in question here. So by Juni and Irene Menekaya Foundation and the RIA project, what actually has been taking place with the foundation for the past 2 years since the inception? One is that we have established an enrollment fund through higher institutions in Nigeria, by helping to, give the, help, necessary help as required as needed. Establish a global care partnership with Ms. Acom for NAT Kid Scholarship Fund on early child education for children from vulnerable homes in rural community through Irene Menekaya School in Onitsha and University. So what exactly is happening here is, through the partnership with Ms. Kakon, we're able to actually, provide a scholarship fund and education through the, the existing school, which was actually started by our parents, by Juni and Irene Menekaya, which is up to date. I myself happen to be an alumni of this school, and today, I'm an engineer. So, and the other thing is we're also doing is we also award 100,000 naira to the best granted student in education on one federal institution and one state institution in Anambra State. And it's also vision to actually expand this to more institutions, both on the federal and the state level, in Nigeria and possibly to other African nations as well, or more rural communities as well. Other thing we have done so far in the past 2 years with partnership with CITEDA through Gregory University in Nigeria by organizing an executive education program for educationists on improvement, qualities, and inclusive education in community. Because one of the key things that is really very important is knowledge. Once one is able to have a better knowledge and understanding about things, then they can be able to actually find, long-lasting solutions, sustainable solutions, wherever, locations or place they might find themselves. And the foundation is working to provide, right now, we're also working to provide a solar power system in communities to enable the establishment of education in the rural community, which this particular project, which I'm kind of really closely involved in because of my background in engineering. So my conclusion right now is, for us to continually to achieve and expand and grow, these visions, missions, aims, and objectives with the foundation, desire to implement these projects across the communities of developing countries. We will call on philanthropists, to help support the vision of the Rural Plus project. We call on technological companies to partner with the foundation to enable the digital technological network capabilities in the rural community, because if we want to really expand this digital to get to every child in the rural without leaving anyone behind, we need those network capabilities, broadband, like mentioned by Ambassador Antonia earlier. And that will also help to actually reach out more and bridge this gap of these kids or these children in this community are able to have access to an international level form of education. So computer donations from local and international partners to help in achieving these goals, because of course, these are one of the key tools that will be required. And together we can all ensure that no child will be left behind, and deeply knowing that, my child is really my pride. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Chuma. Thank you for giving us those wonderful updates. Moving forward, for the sake of time, I would like to ask everyone if you could please, let's try and not compress everything, just stay within the time frame, because we have a few more speakers left, and I don't want to keep everyone here too long or too late. We're going to move into a plenary section, which is the bridging the gap. So the professional development and skill training, the pedagogical intervention. So we're going to look at reimagining community and environmental cultures. So coming to speak to us would be Dr. Barr Teresa Ibas, President of Divine Mercy Foundation for Helpless and Vulnerable People. Dr. Ibas, you have the floor.
Good day, everyone. My name is actually Kade Ibas Adegon. I am one of the directors of the Divine Mercy Foundation. And today I'm speaking on behalf of Dr. Barrister Mrs. Teresa Ibas, our president and founder, Divine Mercy Foundation, based in Nigeria. Unfortunately, she is unavoidably absent today. She would have loved to be here, and she sends her best regards. I consider it a great honor to speak during this forum, and I thank you as you listen. So you will agree with me that the COVID-19 pandemic has brought the pre-crisis vision of equitable, relevant, and quality skills development into sharper demand in our societies, adding unforeseen urgency to the calls for reform and highlighting the huge costs of inaction. The development of skills can contribute to structural transformation and economic growth by enhancing both employability and labor productivity and helping countries to become more competitive. Choosing to invest in a high-quality workforce can create a virtuous cycle where relevant and quality skills enable productivity growth and foreign direct investment, which would result in more jobs, and not just more jobs, but better jobs for the current workforce, and more public and private investment in the education and training system. This in turn would increase the employability and productivity for both the current and future workforce. Community classrooms continue to struggle with delivering on the promise of skills development. And statistics show that there are huge gaps in basic literacy and numeracy skills of working age populations. An alarming number of 750 million people aged 15 and above, or to put this in percentage terms, 18% of the global population report being unable to read and write. And these estimates being nearly twice as large if literacy is measured through direct assessments. Pedagogy in community classrooms are hindered due to inadequate teaching and learning methods, due to the fact that pedagogical personnel are unable to reside in communities which allow them to monitor and keep up with teaching and learning methods. Now, I'll briefly go over 4 key issues that countries need to tackle for skills development in addressing pedagogy in community classrooms. Firstly, access and completion. Across the world, investments in education and skills development from preschool through post-secondary education, all the way to vocational training, have high returns. The provision of equitable access is a challenge in many low and middle income countries. Furthermore, many of the programs do not our less privileged and vulnerable students in communities who manage to even enroll in education or training programs do not end up completing their studies and end up missing out on obtaining formal qualifications. This dramatically reduces returns on educational investments in terms of lifetime earning potential and adverse effect on community development. Secondly, quality. Many young people attend schools without acquiring the very basic literacy skills, which makes them unable to compete in the job market. To be more specific, technical and vocational training systems in communities of developing countries face challenges related to quality assurance, resulting in perceptions of the vocational track being a second best option compared to general secondary or tertiary education. Thirdly, relevance. Technical and vocational education and training, which can last anywhere from 6 months to 3 years, can give young people, especially women, the skills to compete for better paying jobs. Nevertheless, more needs to be done in terms of engaging local employers to ensure that the curriculum and delivery of these programs responds to labor market needs. Fourth and lastly, efficiency. Challenges related to governance, financing, and quality assurance also impact the efficiency of skills development programs. The resulting high cost can limit opportunities for disadvantaged youth and adults to access these programs. These mentioned and much more gaps, many more gaps, have remained for years on end, especially among the helpless and vulnerable groups in communities. And for this reason, Divine Mercy Foundation for Helpless and Vulnerable People has aligned its mission to address these challenges, thereby utilizing available resources within the capacity of the organization to contribute initiatives that can bridge the gap on education in communities. At the last global event of the organization to join in celebration of the 2021 Day of the African Child, Divine Mercy Foundation asserted that for education to be achieved successfully in rural communities, teachers, teaching and learning infrastructure, and students' learning priorities must be made a top precedence in the development agenda. The new normal has geared development towards technology, and this must be rekindled to allow community classrooms to fit into the system and leave no one behind. Divine Mercy Foundation shall continue in this training to expand its activities in the training of teachers in communities of Africa, to upgrade pedagogy, to upgrade teaching skills and norms to include the demands of the new normal. Therefore, Divine Mercy Foundation has mapped out a 1-year teacher skills digital training program for teachers in community classrooms and will supply laptops to these 500 selected teachers on the training. We call on the support of the global community to ensure we utilize a team approach to make this a reality. On behalf of Dr. Barrister Mrs. Theresa Ibas, the CEO and founder, Divine Mercy Foundation, and the entire Divine Mercy Foundation team, thank you very much for listening, and God bless.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. Please extend our gratitude to Dr. Ibas, and thank you very much to you too as well for coming and speaking on her behalf. So, Ambassador Gilbert Secretary, International Consultant in Leadership and Social Entrepreneurship, founder and CEO of the Center for Leadership and Character Education.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir, go ahead.
Okay, thank you very much. I would like to congratulate Dr. Eda for this great initiative. We met several times in the US. Actually, I'm in Ivory Coast, in a small village. Yeah, enjoying agriculture. Yeah. I would like just to share some few words. First of all, when I saw the introductory video, I feel a lot of pain because then I was asking myself, whose fault? Because of those kind of things, we really don't need to show it. Yeah. And I was also asking myself, who we need to give quality education to? Is it for those kids or for our leaders or for ourselves? Because having a school like that in 21st century is a really great shame for all of us. When I realized that most of us who are here now, decision makers and politicians leading the countries, all of us, our parents, our grandparents, they were farmers. Many of them were never even attend any schools, but they made us what we are today. So having those kind of school environment today is a really great shame for us. So I'm asking myself, what do we mean or do we understand by quality education? Is it a good environment, having classrooms, or just to train all our leaders or decision makers actually in this world? When we see the pandemic, all of us, we are hiding ourselves. We cannot go to work. We have to wear masks now. Who brought this pandemic to the world? Until now, we don't know the source of this pandemic. And we have some very great doctors. And even in the beginning of the crisis, it was a shame that America is sending even some astronauts to the galaxy. They cannot even manufacture masks. And they were requesting, fighting with other countries to see that, oh, I ask for some mask from China and other countries that pick it. So if you want a really better world, we need to know or understand clearly what is quality education, what United Nations is looking for, what they define by quality education. And if I just want to go to the gap now, we also need to understand the clear meaning of a gap. How deep is the gap? And what really do we need to bridge it? Because if you don't understand the gap and we try to bridge it, it will not last. So we need to make a kind of inspection to clearly see the damage of education today. And also, who do we really need to bridge that gap? Is it the actual leaders, the politicians, the decision makers, or to bring on the platform all the rural area people, our parents who are farmers, who are giving food to all the world, and to consider the viewpoints and to see how you can really consider try to think about quality education. Another point is bridging the gap. We need to consider two ways. It's not only one way how the citizen of the big cities or the developed countries can just export what they consider as better education to the rural area or to the poor countries. No, it will not work because what we consider as a good education is maybe very bad for the population. And we have seen it. When you see the pollution of the world today, it's not those who are not, who never attend school, who are polluting our world. We all complain about plastic, but it's not the rural area people who are manufacturing the plastics. So we clearly need to understand what is the gap and how to bridge it, who is going to bridge it, and also to see how to consider both way, the rural area and those who never attend school but has values, who can share that values with people who are well-educated, highly educated, to see that our world can be better tomorrow. Another thing is, and the last point I wanted to mention is that to change people's attitude is very complicated. Someone said once that we cannot change people over 50. Yeah, because the mind is really rooted and difficult to change. So it's the children we need to change. Those people we have to really focus on. But what are we going to do with those who are over 50 and who are making the most trouble to the world? So we need to think about it. Even if you are applying some method, actually, we cannot get very quick results. Maybe we have to wait for 30 more years to come, or 50 years before we get a result. So this is what I wanted to mention, and my contribution. And at the CLC, we say that the best in quality education is something that is considered sustainability and better future for next generation. Some universal values that is shared by everyone and how you can apply it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Filbert. Thank you, thank you, thank you. So ladies and gentlemen, it's about that time that I excuse myself from this event. I have another event that I have to attend, but I must say thank you very much to everyone so far who have made a contribution, who have spoken. Thank you very much for your contribution. Thank you very much for taking the time from your busy schedule to be here to speak to us. Dr. Ada, thank you very much for entrusting Magban Corporation to be a partner with the Irene, Menekaya and Barr Juni Foundation. And with that being said, I know I said to you earlier, grab your checkbooks. Well, part of what Magban Corporation is doing is we have partnered with Irene Menekaya Barr Juni Foundation, and we support them in every way possible. And as the president and the CEO, we are very much happy for the work that the foundation has been doing. So with that being said, in the chat today, we will be posting a Zelle and the Cash App, and Dr. Ada will give you any other means and ways in which you can make monetary contribution and donations. They are aiming to raise $10,000 so they can be able to help with the education for those children back in Nigeria. And not just Nigeria alone, but other parts of the world at the same time. You've heard Dr. Chuma, Mr. Chuma mentioned as well concerning the laptops for children. So all of this will be going towards those ventures. Dr. Antoine as well, he has his books that he has donated as well to the foundation. So in this vein, I would like to ask you all to please, you can make a monetary donation. We are starting the ball off rolling. We will make the first $100 contribution, US dollars, not Ghanaian or yen or any other currency. If you bring in £100 or 100 euro, then yes, you can. But we know that it costs to do a lot of these things. So please make any contribution you can, and it will be going directly to the Barr Juni Foundation. At the next event that we have, that the Barr Juni Foundation have, they will let you know directly how much they've received so far and give you a brief report on it. So with that being said, it is my great honor to say thank you very much for allowing me, Dr. Ada, and to everyone here for having me as your moderator for this very first section. So before I go, I would like to introduce one last speaker, and then I will excuse myself. Ladies and gentlemen, coming to speak to us, Professor Geoffrey Shihaba Malomahalo. I hope I pronounced it correctly. Please forgive me if I butchered your name. I have no intentions to do that. The
No,
research of
thank you
education.
very much. Can you see my, oh, sorry. I will be, maybe I should not share my slide, but can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
All right. So I've titled my presentation in the same manner as the title for for this session appears: Strategies for Overcoming Learning Crisis in Achieving Quality Education in Community Classroom. So the first point that I would want to make is the outline of what I want to talk about. That firstly, I would want to define what community classroom actually mean for me. Perhaps I should have indicated that I come from the University of Mpumalanga in South Africa, and where the concept of community classroom does take place, but it involves a particular section in the community. I'll come to that later on. So firstly, I would want to define what community classroom is. And then secondly, I would want to look at the crisis of learning in community education. And then thirdly, look at what could constitute quality education. And then finally, I'll spend most of the 7 minutes on strategy for overcoming learning crisis. And when I do so, I will try to focus in the classroom situation, what happens there. Now, the concept classroom communication for me seem to be related to concepts, those that I have tabulated. Firstly, on community in the classroom. And that for me implies that community classroom has to involve caring, the question of trust, the question of mutual support that marks what a community is. So when we're talking community classroom, we're talking about those safe spaces where caring for one another takes place in the best interest of education. Furthermore, the other version of community classroom could be a classroom in the community. That is a classroom which is not just really located at a school, but where the entire community constitute a classroom, meaning that where education occurs ubiquitously, whether it's irrespective of the location or where the learner could be in that particular community. Then the third concept is that one of classroom for the community, where the emphasis here is where the classroom serves the best interest of the community. I think we know many instances where schools are related to what happens in the community. Schools are the microcosms of what happens in the community. So the classroom encapsulates curriculum as considered to be important and valid in the community. And then lastly, it's a community for the classroom, where the support basically in the community is geared towards improving quality in the classroom. So the four versions there for me come to the fore when one considers the concept of community classroom. And this is what I understand this whole concept to be. And that you'll find that there are different versions of community classroom depending on various contexts. For example, in Europe, in rich countries like Sweden and so on, you have forms of community classroom, but they don't serve the same purpose, or they don't assume the same nature as community classrooms in poor countries on the African continent. But what is common amongst them all is that all of these community classrooms are safe spaces that are being created where learners can learn freely and more productively. Now, the areas that this conference today covers, I think from the previous presentation, I think we've heard they're talking about quality and inclusive education. And this is just something that I will refer to in passing, because when we're talking about classroom, community classroom, we're thinking about those disabilities, children coming in the classroom, coming to learn in schools, coming from backgrounds of poverty or of exclusion, or just disabilities among themselves, hard of hearing, poor eyesight, not, and so on. So community classrooms should create spaces where inclusivity does take place, where children, irrespective from where they're coming from, there is that openness in terms of universal access from diversity of children coming into that. And this the conference also talks about technology and innovative solutions. I'll very indirectly refer to that because especially now during the time of the COVID-19, when the normal classroom, where the normal community classroom or the normal classroom has been interrupted, there's more and more reliance on innovation, on technology and on the use of innovative solutions. And the various speakers, I think, that we've listened to today have talked about those pillars of learning in bridging the gap. And I'll try to talk very briefly around those. And among those, I'll be emphasizing professional development and skills, because currently teachers and people who offer tuition in community classroom need new skills, better skills, especially in as far as the technologies are involved. And then lastly, it will be a question of pedagogical intervention. Now, very briefly, I have already indicated that I come from South Africa, and there are issues that create inequalities in contexts like those that are coming from. One of them would be question of race. I think all of us are familiar of racial inequalities, racial divisions that not only occur in South Africa, but throughout the world. The issue of race is one kind of point that marks inequality amongst people. Issues of social class distinction, the divide between the urban and the rural, issues of employment. These are particularly important in contexts such as those that I come from. Employment, poverty, inequality, violence, especially against women and children and people that are vulnerable. So these issues were still there even before the coming onto the picture of the pandemic. But what has happened is that since 2020, this inequalities, these forms of exclusion and whatever have become more magnified. And in my view, I think most of this are as a result of lack of funding, which I think the conference has talked to very greatly. And funding resources is one thing that brings about social class distinction and division, and which brings about inequality amongst people. So no matter how we're trying to bridge the gap, we're trying to provide education, especially in the era of the pandemic, funding becomes very critical. The second point is that now that the mode of teaching has shifted from face-to-face as demanded by the compliance to COVID-19 protocol in order to prevent the spread of the spread of the virus, we find that we have to teach remotely, we have to interact remotely, all our activities are done remotely. But we find that question of electricity, like some of the speakers have talked about, is an important factor in as far as community classrooms are concerned. Issues of infrastructure and technology. Not all classrooms, not all schools, not all learners are able to have access to requisite infrastructure and technology. We have seen some of the classrooms that one of the speakers referred to earlier on. And we still have similar kind of inequalities, even in countries like those that I'm coming from. Issues of connectivity. This is not evenly spread out. And so even if we would want to continue teaching during the pandemic using technology, but because connectivity is prescribed in terms of communities that can afford, fluid communities and so on, provision of devices and technologies, they're uneven. And even in terms of home learning as an aspect thereof, some homes, you find that there's no space for children to learn because the homes themselves are in an informal settlement or in shacks, and people are crowded. Even if learners have to learn from home, they are just not able to because of the conditions that prevail there. They have to run errands, to do chores at the home. There's no time for learning. So the ideal would have been if there would be spaces that I've referred to, safe spaces where they would learn without without interruption. Learning materials and the curriculum. The curriculum that we have currently was not conceptualized with the pandemic in mind. So there has to be adjustment now that we have the so-called new normal with slightly different demands on what should be taught. Issues of capacity, even teachers themselves, they need support in terms of mounting or putting materials online, even if the facilities will be there, the infrastructure, but the capacity to put materials there has to be jacked up, has to be revamped and to be strengthened. There has to be continuous professional development, because when we're talking community classrooms, we find that sometimes people that volunteer to come and support as teachers may not have acquired requisite training in teaching and learning. And therefore, there has to be a continuous professional development of those people who continue coming in to support teaching and learning. Now, there are a number of examples of good teaching that I've looked at, in particular from Kenya and other places, in terms of community classrooms. And one thing that marks those are in terms of effective communication that happens in communities, individuals that come to volunteer, the people that provide spaces for children to learn, those who cannot be accommodated at school due to the lockout or lockdown, then they find spaces in the community where individuals with sufficient spaces would accommodate 5, 6 or so number of children, and they would have Wi-Fi or TV where children could still learn irrespective of whether they can go to school. So the most effective point that I really found assisting in terms of ensuring that children still learn in spite of the lockdown is about effective communication. Communication that happens amongst teachers, even though they're no longer at school. Communication that happens within communities. Communication that happens within communities in relation to the national government. And communication that involves the private sector, using TV, using radio, and effective use of technology. And also an important point in some of the countries that I've looked at, it's a question of making technology free, so that everybody there is a possibility of accessing information irrespective of where they are. And some of the points that I saw as aspects of good practice is that sometimes the government may be pursuing agendas that does not contribute towards the development of community classrooms. So those communities that are involved with that will have access to advise government. They will be engaged in campaign to raise awareness in communities about the existence of community classrooms. And there would be communication and support to the enhancement of curriculum. There would be opportunities for teachers and people that are supportive of those contexts to learn new strategies of learning, of teaching, effectively. Now, lastly, let me talk about examples of assessment as just one aspect of teaching, where assessment is assessment for teaching, and it's assessment for learning. That instead of solely focusing on high stakes examinations, where children come to the classroom and they have to be there in the examination hall, there could be organized alternative means of assessment without destroying or bringing down the status, the standards, where we could be using of quizzes on everyday classroom activities, just to keep the students and the learners, the children, on their toes, and to ensure that they're learning gradually and every day as they're being taught. There could be opportunities for student development quizzes, where students themselves set quizzes for their peers, and they are responding to those, because when students are involved in designing these quizzes, then they tend to learn more and understand their subject matter even better than when they're only responding to quizzes. We could be using open book tests, take-home tests. There could be also professional they could be required to do professional presentations and demonstration of something, even irrespective of their age. They could be engaged in a project of some kind, and they could be doing videos of that and uploading that for assessment of the teachers. They could be putting together annotated anthology and bibliographies, putting together fact sheets, peer and self-reviews, production of e-portfolios, and group assessment. So in my view, there are a number of strategies, very practically, that we could be embarking upon in order to maintain the level or the standard of teaching and learning, irrespective of the pandemic. But the most important factor, and I think this is what the conference is addressing, it's about resources, ensuring all these things can happen or cannot happen, depending on the presence or absence of funds to ensure that we don't leave any child behind. Ladies and gentlemen, that would be my presentation this evening. Thank you very much.
Wow, thank you, Prof, for that in-depth explanation on bridging the gaps and possible strategies in addressing challenges and gaps in education in communities. You have delved into more strategies and in-depth activities or initiatives that can come up through this platform or through this foundation in working towards solutions on education gaps and challenges in communities. Thank you so much, Prof, for that intervention statement. And definitely it's going to be your ideas and initiative will form part of the outcome of this presentation, which we will want to get back to you after today. Thank you so much. I know that time is running fast. Most of us are tired, but I know that when we talk on education, it's something that will give time for because it's a very complex, it's a very complex compound. It's a very complex agenda in trying to build both human development, resources, and national development. So we apologize for the time. We are supposed to end this by 1:30, but I want to encourage that before 2 p.m., everything about this program will end. And without wasting much time, we want to call upon the last speaker. The last speaker is Professor Chigo Ofon, who is Professor Ofon is a former dean and professor, School of Business Administration, Harris Stowe State University, St. Louis, Missouri. Prof, you have the floor.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you, Dr. Adam Ukike, for the opportunity to participate in this year's by Juni and Irene Menekaya Legacy Lectures. It is my pleasure to have the opportunity to discuss with many experts the state of education in Africa today. I am expected to speak on professional development and training, and I'll do the best I can to condense what I have to say because of the time limits that we have. My objective will be to condense this into three. I will talk about digital challenge, and this will be the sustained and continuing global disruption in the workshop caused by the onset of the fourth industrial revolution, worsened in Africa by the impact of COVID-19. Second, an outline of how these disruptions in the workplace can be addressed through professional development and training. Third, the need for reform of the education system in Africa, or risk failing to provide skills for the future. Digital challenge. Now, as a result of the disruptions caused by the onset of the fourth industrial revolution, some trends have emerged that are shaping the future of work and impacting on how organizations are developing and engaging with employees. There is the skills gap and structural unemployment. Organizations struggle to keep pace with innovation and difficulty of finding qualified candidates to fill vacant positions. There is also, this gap can be bridged through a structured professional development and training program. Topics like this, I'm not going to go into the details of these topics because of the time constraints. The topics that may be covered in a professional development and training program include communication, conflict resolution, leadership, critical thinking, interpersonal skills, time and priority management, diversity and generational differences in the workplace, problem solving, industry-specific regulations and emergency procedures, cybersecurity, and on-the-job training. And by on-the-job training, I mean providing knowledge and skills essential for adequate performance of one's job. And this would include job instruction, mentoring, coaching, rotation, apprenticeship, and committee assignments. Education reform. African countries are facing an unprecedented challenge to update education systems built for another era, for which they have no choice. This task requires a change in how and when people learn. On how people learn, given that traditional pedagogical methods and infrastructure are not geared toward 21st century skills, education institutions will have to introduce not only more technology, but also how it is taught in classrooms. It should be integrated in the pedagogy across all subjects, such that when woven into every major, the technology experience of every student will be enriched. With lifelong lessons required today, instead of the traditional model of education at the start of a career, adult workers need to upgrade their skills on an ongoing basis. But unfortunately, there are not many available training options for them today. Education providers should therefore adapt to the learning styles and requirements of adult learners today, instead of the focus on traditional age groups. African education institutions should accelerate the digitization of curricula and promote a culture of online training and distance education, while also strengthening the capability of teachers in techno-pedagogy through more investment in digital infrastructure by governments and the private sector. Doing this will facilitate technology access to a wider group of students, as well as mitigate the impact of unforeseen future exogenous crises. In conclusion, digital skills challenge in sub-Saharan Africa is very critical but addressable. Digital skills are essential to the future workforce in Africa, with basic skills most critical. Africa needs training programs and reform of education systems to bridge current skills demand and supply gap and ensure employers can hire and then ensure that employers can hire locally find suitable training for employees, and help workers keep pace with new technology in their industries. This is the much I can say for now, given the constraints. Thank you and for having me here today.
Wow, Prof, you said it all. Thank you for the intervention statement and contribution to the outcome of this event. You narrowly, strategically bring together every of the presentations into 3 blocks, and that is very vital for us in trying to move the concerns on community education gaps and challenges forward. I thank you very much, Prof. This shows that from your presentation, you spoke out of experience, having started education in the community and up to the global standard. So thank you so much for those critical knowledge and information you brought forward, which we are assured that they will form part of the outcome of this presentation, of this event, and also to further our action in trying to address the challenges in bridging these gaps in communities. Thank you so much, Prof. And we will follow on with you on the outcome for further discussions.
Thank
I
you.
know time is spent and everyone is tired. A lot of people have left. Some are on mute, some are not. But it's been an interesting, informative section in addressing concerns, in seeking solution to community education gaps and challenges. What we are addressing is to ensure that every child in the community is not left behind, and every child wears the garment of "my child is my pride." And that is a legacy that we are brought into, and that's a legacy train we want to move. My child is my pride. And adding it to the United Nations agenda on leave no one behind. So all the presentations today have been so aligned to this great mission. And we are calling on all of you to strengthen us and be part of us in trying to take this initiative to a further level. I want to thank the ambassadors, the professors, and Ambassador Time who guided this initiative, who guided this, especially this program, with advisory guidance and recommendations. They recommended the ambassador from Holland and also Prof. These are his recommendations, who is believed that their input to this initiative will strengthen what we want to do. And I'm glad they're able to honor that representation. I appreciate you so much. So, Ambassador Time, we can't thank you enough. You have continued to be the father of this foundation and the father of what we want to do, and all the guidance you are giving us in my family, myself, and my siblings, in ensuring that our parents' legacy is continued. I know you've written some books in terms of quality education and SDGs, which this foundation will plan to adopt to make it a global outreach. So myself and the director for outreach will discuss with you on that in the coming weeks to see how we can integrate it into the Juni Foundation. So without that, I want to call on Dr. Jide Menekaya, the Vice President of this foundation, to give us a closing remarks. Dr. Menekaya, can you unmute yourself?
Thank you so much, everybody. I'm sorry about that. It's a little bit of a technical issue. I suppose a reflection of the sort of things we've been talking about technology. So my battery ran out, and so I had to go and charge it quickly. So I'm so sorry, but I suspect this sort of I suppose it gives a sense of what millions of other children and teachers across the world who don't have easy access to electricity and how that might impact on their training. So and also the education. We heard a lot from several ambassadors, Ambassador Antoine, Ambassador Pina, several professors, a particularly very passionate speech by the Dr. Essas, who was the OMEP lead from the United Nations, as well as a professor who just spoken about strategy. So we're really thankful. Our parents have left a legacy of education, and we are proud to be continuing this, perhaps in a more I'm bringing it up to date to the 21st century, recognizing the difficulties and the challenges which we've talked about today. We do hope that some of the things we've learned today will inspire us. And on behalf of my siblings, my sister, we thank everyone who's spoken to.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Terry. Thank you. And Dr. Evans, my good boss. I know she was not left out, So thank you, everyone. Thank you, Ambassador Antoine. We are Oliver Twist, so we are wanting more, so we come again. Yes. Thank you, Prof, for those strategic interventions. I'll get back to you again so that we can move those strategies forward as well. Thank you, Dr. Mary Ume, for being the rapporteur for this event. I don't know, a lot of you, my brother Chuma that did presented our strategy on Rural Plus. I can't thank you enough, and everyone who have been patient, all the attendees, those members of Root Sisters Fellowship International who are here from the beginning. I thank you. So I can see the director for membership. I can see the board, advisory board chair. I can see the board chair as well. I can see our secretary at Youth Gather Global all the way from South Africa. Oh my God. I can see Madband Corporation as well. The African Regional Consultant from Nigeria, Dr. Habike. I can see them on the line. Oh my God. I can't thank you guys enough for being there. And all our partners, McBank Corp. I can see my spiritual mentor, Her Excellency Ambassador Dr. Toyin Lawal, all the way from California. Oh my God, wonderful. Thank you all for being here, and many others who were here. We weren't able to get some speakers due to connectivity from Africa, except those who calling from Africa to speak, and that their papers and presentation will be included in our report. So thank you all for this wonderful section, and we'll move on.